fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
Mr. Houston, say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show, weekdays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And now your hosts, Joe Hagmann and Jon Robberson.
Hello and welcome to this Thursday, February 15th, 2018 edition of the Hagmann Daily Show. I almost said Wednesday. It is great to be here. We have a lot we're going to get into today. Obviously, we're going to spend the majority of our time talking about this latest school shooting, I imagine, as there is a lot of information to get into. And this happened just after our show yesterday, John. As I said on the Hagmann Report last night, after our show, we got done. I posted it. I cooked some food. I took a shower, and then as I was getting ready, I saw on the TV the story breaking. And as of this morning, we have a lot of information. And I just want people to take notice of how the information of this incident is flowing, unlike that of Las Vegas, where we had a complete opposite. We didn't even have a proper count on the numbers during the first few days of that shooting, and then they're still updating it as far as injuries and whatnot, and we don't know anything really about Paddock, where we're learning a life history with this person who carried out the attack. And it is a complete opposite. Some people say it's because of possible legal ramifications with the casinos and whatnot. Either way, there's no excuse for why you have a plethora of information in one shooting, in one incident, and in the other you don't get anything. You get stonewalled, and the FBI covers it up. But we have been learning a lot about this person, and apparently everybody knew he was going to do this, or had it in him, was capable of it. Even he said as much. And John, we're going to talk about the posting on YouTube, which he said on a comment section under another person's YouTube video that he was going to be a professional shooter. That information was relayed to the FBI immediately when it happened in September. The FBI actually visited the person who reported it and took the information of what exactly he said, and nothing happened. And there's a lot more that we're learning too. What do you think, John?
Well, Joe, the question that immediately comes to mind is how many of these reports do the authorities receive, and what action can they take if they are able to identify, for example, in this case, who the commenter on the comment board of this particular YouTube is or was. Interestingly,
he used his name.
He used his name. The avatar is the generic little kind of blue-purple silhouette if someone chooses not to go on Google Chrome and put their picture in. But the maker of the video was interviewed by the FBI at the time, and to his credit, he notified the FBI right away. And to the FBI's credit, they interviewed him the following day. And so John, they jumped on this, but then it seems like at that point, Joe, the buck sort of stopped.
Yeah, and think of this of our YouTube channel. We don't read all the comments. If somebody posted something like that on our YouTube channel or our videos, unless it was brought to our attention, we really, I don't think we would know. But and this was just one indicator. He was expelled from school for fighting. He was not even allowed to carry a backpack on school after he was found with bullets before he was expelled. So the school knew of the possible dangers of this person. The FBI knew of the potential dangers of this person. And this is just, 12, 15, 18 hours after this happened. I'm sure we're going to learn a little bit more. The social media accounts were scrubbed completely, but many people were able to capture different screenshots. And apparently this suspect was interviewed for 12 hours as he was booked this morning, being charged with 17 counts of premeditated murder in a heavily favored death penalty state. I imagine they're going to use the death penalty in this case. Well, I hope they would at least. But, a lot of people are arguing for different things today, and we see the usual network, mainstream media, gun control push. And if you go to newsbusters.org, one of my favorite media analyst sites, you see just the whole thing, top to bottom, is clips of CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, NBC, fear-mongering and talking about gun control, as we see so often when these things happen. Even MSNBC says the Second Amendment is a suicide pact that we are slaughtered for. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, please.
Right?
I mean,
we've had guns in this country since its inception. We've never had problems like this.
We've had guns in this country since Westerners first put their first big toe on this country, 200 years before we had an actual country. We have had guns on this terra firma since a gun was basically a stick with a barrel attached to it and a big long wick hanging out of it that you had to use to touch off the gunpowder. So, this notion that an inanimate object will one day, in a sort of a cartoonish manner, grow legs and arms and perhaps some kind of funny-looking face, and it will march dutifully into an establishment and start firing itself. The day that happens, Joe, is the day I'll turn them all in. And, of course, that'll be a red-letter day for Feinstein and her ilk. I did a quick little historical background, Joe, on how we got here. And because I think a lot of our listeners today probably feel the same way I do, wondering how does somebody get to this point? And we've seen different types of shooters than what we saw in the earlier days of mass shootings. Now, myself being old enough to remember these, I remember some of the first mass shootings in the country. Now, one of the first in modern times was, of course, at Texas University, the famous Texas Tower shooting. And for all of the gun grabbers out there, I would remind them that it was not uniformed and badged authorities who took that perpetrator out. It was Texans who ran to their trucks and took their deer rifle, their little .22 squirrel rifle, or their shotgun off the rack of their truck and ran up that tower and put an end to that mass shooting. Remember, that sniper had, a 200-foot elevation on everybody in that plaza at University of Texas and was just shooting at will. And that was in 1966. But that precedes my time on this earth, Joe. But the two that I remember very distinctly, the first is the San Isidro McDonald's massacre. And that was the first time mass shooting really landed on the American public's radar in my lifetime. And what happened there, it happened in San Diego, is a shooter came into a McDonald's restaurant in San Isidro on July 18th, 1984. 41-year-old James Huberty shot and killed 21 people and injured 19 others before being fatally shot by a SWAT team sniper. Then that was followed not too long thereafter by the first school shooting. So that McDonald's shooting was the first time that the American public had to kind of grapple with, at least of my generation, I was 12 years old when that happened, had to grapple with this idea that you could go into a public space to eat a Big Mac and you could be shot for no reason whatsoever, except you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. Then just 5 years later, this occurred when I was 17, was the Cleveland Elementary School shooting. Now, this is the one that really horrified the nation.
I don't remember that one.
This is the Stockton schoolyard shooting, parenthetically also known as the Cleveland School Massacre, occurred on January 17th, 1989 at Cleveland Elementary School at 20 East Fulton Street in Stockton, California. Stockton, I would add, that is such a mess due to what our second hour guest last night Jim Lancia called the political use of a mayor's police force as a political army. Sorry, I'm fumbling with my words today. Stockton's such a mess that it's one of about 6 cities under a federal police beta test right now, Joe. So Stockton, California is an absolute criminal disaster. But this happened back in 1989. The gunman, Patrick Purdy, who had a long criminal history, shot and killed 5 school children and wounded 32 others before committing suicide. His victims were predominantly Southeast Asian refugees. I do remember there was a racial component to that shooting. So that's where, so I want to just remind our listeners that this didn't start with Sandy Hook. This didn't start with the Pulse nightclub. This didn't start with Major Nadal Hassan. Right. This did not start with the Navy Yard killing a few years ago. This started 4 decades ago. Now, Joe, my question is, what happens to these people who become, I guess they become so enraged with society as a whole? I know I have days where I don't even want to leave the house because I just don't want to deal with people.
Right.
But there's an awful long jump from I think I'll stay home and pet the kitty cats, maybe eat some groceries I already bought because I don't want to go out today, to I think I'll load one of my guns and go shoot everybody. I mean, that's a heck of a jump. And yet some of these twisted minds make it. Joe, what do you think?
Well, I wonder oftentimes, I do see a difference between school shootings and mass shootings like we saw in the church in the end of last year, like we saw in Las Vegas, like we saw in the Pulse nightclubs, because I believe usually the school shootings are carried out by students or ex-students, but you're targeting you're targeting children, and it's horrific to think about. In elementary school, even worse. But I guess there really is no distinction. It's the same mentality. But as many people have said, and as we just mentioned about the history of firearms in our country, we've always had a free society with a Second Amendment leaving people the ability to be armed. And we've had I'd say, if anything, less and less people by percentage are armed today than they were maybe 100 years ago. And I don't know if that's accurate or not. But just on looking at the way society is and how so many people dislike guns. But this is not a gun problem. It's just like what the media says when they talk about terrorism, Islamic terrorism, and you say, well, ban Muslims. Obviously you can't ban Muslims, but not all Muslims are violent. But there is there is a percentage of the extreme ideology that do become violent, and it seems to be growing. And this is, I don't know if it's an increased level of evil, the confusion, the chaos that's in our society, but we also see a rise in these violent types of events, including the mass shooters. And we've seen over the years in the world, remember the Norway shooter who went on the island and shot all the kids that were part of a political party?
Yes.
I mean,
hold on. What these kids were, they were just young kids at summer camp.
Right.
The
they
summer
were kids
camp
of
was
the parents who were of a political leaning.
It was kind of like if you were a 10-year-old and you were at Baptist church camp. You're just a 10-year-old at camp that happens to be sponsored by the Baptist church. But go ahead.
We see it's politically motivated. You have it's mental health motivated. There are a lot of reasons. Some are saying that this shooter is autistic. Other people are saying he had other mental health problems. We know he was adopted at birth, and recently his adoptive parents died, including his adopted mother, who just died I think 6 months to a year ago. So there were triggers that that there are things that trigger people. If you ever study serial killer cases, a lot of times there seems to be an event that triggers the killing. And I think that is also very frequently the same in these shooting cases that we see. So maybe there are similarities in these behaviors and mentalities from serial killers to mass shooters.
Ooh,
I guess mass shooters are serial killers. But either way.
Well, hold on. Are they? Because we know that many serial killers kill for either perverse sexual release or for the
true, John.
Perversion of like the what's it called, like
You're
the
right.
power,
the sexual
power surge that they get.
Yeah, the control.
I don't. Okay, but let's unpack this a little bit because we have time today, and frankly, it's kind of a slow news cycle. Although, remind me, I do have a piece on Bruce and Nellie Orr that we need to touch on just to keep our listeners up to date on the FISA issue. Okay, so just a quick glance to context the conversation we're about to have, Joe. This is from CNN. It was posted today. And, I just wish CNN would get back to doing more stuff like this because it seems to be pretty middle. I haven't read the last couple paragraphs that I'm sure slam the Second Amendment, but this is from CNN.com. Deadliest mass shootings in modern U.S. history, fast facts. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to go through enough to demonstrate a clear pattern, Joe. 58 killed, October 1, 2017 in Las Vegas, Stephen Paddock. 49 killed, June 12, 2016, Omar Sadiq Mateen, Pulse nightclub. 32 killed, April 16th, 2007, the day I lost my brother Jared, actually. Virginia Tech. 27 killed, December 14, 2012, Sandy Hook. 25 and an unborn child killed, November 5, 2017, just happened 5 weeks to the date after Vegas in Sutherland Springs, Texas at the church. 23 killed, October 16, 1991 in Killeen, Texas at Luby's Cafeteria. That one slipped off my radar. 21 killed, going back to the beginning of our show, July 1984 in San Isidro, California. 18 killed in 1966. We talked about that. Austin, Texas. Charles Joseph Whitman shooting from the tower. 14 killed, December 2nd, 2015. This is the what's the couple's name? I'm drawing. This is the San Bernardino killing, the terrorist killing.
Did you mention the DC snipers too? Because they went.
They're coming up. I think they killed 13 or they killed 11. The reason they were so profound in the news is because that went on for several weeks. Remember, we'd have one or 2
went on
days.
for months.
Yeah, it went on for a long time. And I had a dear friend who actually went on to a great acting career. I met her on Power Rangers, and her family lived in the area that he was operating in, and it was just a really big deal. But here's my point, is that this has become, how do I put this, Joe? This has become almost like a subculture of a popularity contest between these sick, warped people. And we see that clearly with what this most recent perp posted on that YouTube video. See, it used to be that we as the American people had a sense that these shootings were random acts from highly disturbed people, be it pharmaceutical, be it emotional, be it a point of trauma earlier in their lives. But now what we're seeing, and the media is complicit in this, the media needs to own its portion on this for sure. Now what we're seeing is, Joe, I hate to call it this, but it's like a finger quotes popularity contest to see who can get the highest body count.
It is, John, and it's unfortunate. And see, this is the thing about the Las Vegas shooting. I don't know. We still don't understand the motive behind that shooting, and I believe it's either a political motive or a terrorism type motive, which are actually one and the same. But this is very personal. Now, this kid, as we said earlier, went to school at this school. Apparently didn't have many friends, was kind of his behavior described by other students seemed kind of sporadic and chaotic, and he was a loner, I guess. And all the social media information that we have, from the YouTube posting to the Instagram accounts where it's just him holding different weapons, and as we said, they scrubbed the social media accounts entirely, so we only have screenshots of what people were able to grab before this went public, and
we did grab a bunch of those at the Hagmann Report studio. But go ahead, Joe.
But no, all the signs, all the warning signs were there. As we said earlier, even the school talked about they expelled him because he had bullets and he was very disciplinary actions. He was a very troubled student, and the FBI was warned about him. So what else can be done? Gun control is not the answer, because we know, as we've seen in the UK, when you de-arm the population, the attacks come in other ways, whether it's stabbings or car rammings or whatever the case may be, bombings. People who want to kill find ways to kill. And the media is so quick to jump on, when are we going to talk about the Second Amendment? I mean, it's so obvious at this point that these people are going to ban guns. Whenever they get the chance, they're going to move to ban guns.
Good luck. You know what that's like? That's like you wake up in the morning, you're a little bit groggy, you got 2 pieces of bread left. You pop them in the toaster, you get sidetracked for a minute, they turn into 2 pieces of sliced charcoal. So you blame the toaster and you throw the toaster out, and then you call the store and tell the store to stop selling the toaster. That's how stupid this gun grabbing argument is, Joe. When clearly it's your behavior, it's your action that caused you to burn your toast. That's literally what that is. I know it's a dumb analogy, but that's what we're talking about here. Your car will never run into a group of pedestrians on a bridge unless you get behind the wheel and floor the accelerator and point the car at those people. Your car is never going to do that on its own.
So what are we talking about here? What can be done to deter or stop further shootings is the conversation that we always seem to have after these events, but never seem to implement any type of action.
Well, there's 2 things that can be done, brother. There's 2 things that can be done. And any of the liberal secularists that listen to our show, all 2 of them, are not going to like my answer. But on a spiritual level, we need to recognize 2 things. That prayer works for a demon-free or an environment with lesser demonic principalities and presence in it. Okay, for example, if you go to downtown Los Angeles, Manhattan, the Strip on the Las Vegas Strip, there is so much demonic activity there that if you were able to see into that spiritual dimension, you would see creatures of all shapes and sizes flying all over the place, riding on tops of cars, riding on people's shoulders, whispering in people's ears, tugging people by the hand. You would see the demonic activity. Whereas if you go 100 miles outside of Rapid City, South Dakota, and you're standing in a soybean field, there might not be a demon for a square mile around unless you brought him in with you. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So a lot of these, it does not escape my notice that a lot of these mass shootings, a lot of these mass casualty events happen in cities, and they happen in distressed areas. And in some cases, you have to go back in history and say, well, what went on in San Isidro, California, or what's the history of Stockton, California? You may have to go back a generation or 2 to realize that you're still standing on sort of like a demonic stronghold of terra firma. So that's number 1. Prayer is number 1. Number 2, and this is something I think a lot more of our listeners will relate to, is get your carry permit and carry a gun. The reason these people can kill 25 people with 2 30-round box mags and an AR-15 that they just took out of the box and may have not even practiced with, it's pretty easy to hit something at 20 or 30 feet point-blank range. Joe, it's because there's nobody to turn around and put 1 or 2 in them. And everybody always says, well, that's like the wild, wild west. That's nonsense. You're talking cowboy. That's the Wild West. Well, I've got news for those people. Again, drawing on history. The Wild West was one of the most gentlemanly, chivalrous places as a society that we've seen in recent times. The Wild West was literally, your handshake was your word. Men did not mistreat women like they do in the movies. That's Hollywood. That's not how the Wild West really was. And you know why the Wild West was so gentlemanly? Because most of the people that came west grew up with the Bible and in church, and most of the people that came west, Joe, were wearing a gun.
Well, even in that society, you still had your criminals, you still had your gangs and whatnot. And it just goes to show you're never going to be able to eradicate crime in any society. And if the FBI, was too busy to, interfering in elections and trying to sabotage the president of the United States rather than doing their actual job and, following up on threats made by people like this. And, one of the first things I would do is if I was called to somebody's house to check on a comment like that and I was tasked with investigating it, one of the first things I would do would be looking up gun purchases and to see if not only that person had access to guns or had guns on his name, but had access to guns through other family members. It would be one of the first things you would do. At least you would think. So what are we going to learn about this? Are we going to learn that the FBI got this information and didn't follow up, or followed up but couldn't, he didn't buy the gun at that point? You'd think that there would be some sort of red flag that would go into a person's file through a gun buying system, at least to notify authorities before he was able to purchase a gun. But we at this point don't know if the gun that was used he purchased or if it was purchased by somebody else. The police said that they know where the gun was purchased from or who owned it beforehand. So they said they will shed light on that as the investigation moves forward. But either way, this is a real problem in our society, and we're going to continue to have these problems until we figure out how to pose a big enough threat. The only thing that stops a person with a gun is another person with a gun. You have to equal or go over the amount of force that is being used against you if you want to win a battle. And whether it's a car ramming you or somebody with a knife or a gun, if a person's intent on killing, you need a deterrent that is able to stop them before they get going. And whether that's armed teachers, armed security guards,
armed pilots,
whatever, it needs to be done.
Joe, there's another thing that we should discuss, and then
you can't rely on the cops to
absolutely not. The cops will tell you. The cops will tell you, especially good cops like James Lancia, who joined us on the Hagmann Report last night. And we've got firearms instructor, and he does a number of other things I don't think I'm at will to discuss right now. But we have Keith Hansen joining us for an hour tonight, so we're bringing in good people to analyze this thing on the evening show. But Joe, there's something else we should talk about before we move into some of the other news today, and we can stay on the shooting for a while longer if you want. But behavioral modification as well. The old saying, nothing good happens after midnight. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. When I was in my mid-20s, I had lived a fast, hard life from the age of 17 or 18 up through about 24, 25. And I realized through a number of events that occurred, primarily to my friends, that I needed to slow down, okay? That I didn't need to be out on the streets of San Francisco outside some warehouse party at 4:30 in the morning, 2 or 3 nights a week. That eventually that somebody that gets taken down or taken out or hurt is going to be me. And the rave scene, by the way, was a relatively nonviolent scene, but there was still a lot of criminal elements surrounding that era and that time, early 90s San Francisco. My point is, all of a sudden, it occurred to me on New Year's Eve one night, I was sitting in a donut shop, and I saw about 30 San Francisco police walk into this donut shop, all wearing jeans, windbreakers that said police, carrying their sidearms on one side, and maybe 20 flexi cuffs on the other. And I had a pocket full of felonies. We'll just leave it at that. I was probably in my early 20s. And it occurred to me that night, it was New Year's Eve. Why am I here right now? I could go out any night of the year, basically, but I'm out on the night where they're looking for people who are looking for trouble, who are looking to get loaded, who are looking to have fun, blah, blah, blah. My point is, I changed my whole life, Joe, in a very short period of time. I moved up to the mountains. I got into snowboarding, mountain bike riding. I joined the gym and started going to college and had a great time. It wasn't like I left this amazing thing behind. I left kind of this gutter existence of watching the sun come up in San Francisco in dirty, urine-stained alleys for living in Marin County and all of a sudden having a much better life. My point is, behavioral modification makes a huge difference because guess what? One of my good friends who I hung out with at these rave parties all the time, within 6 months of my moving to Marin, he got popped with a half sheet of LSD on him. Back then, California considered the weight of the blotter paper that the acid is infused into no different than if it were the crystalline substance itself, meaning that whereas he only had 50 tablets, 50 tabs, if you will, of LSD, the law treated him as though he had 50,000 tabs worth of the lysergic acid diethylamide crystal. And they threw him in San Quentin for 10 years. He got 10 years state for that. And I could easily...
Rough.
It's rough. I could have easily been in the car with him that night. Behavioral modification makes a big difference. When you go out, keep your head on a swivel. One more story and I'll pass it back to you. Doug Hagmann and I went out and I had to run a few errands for the studio the other day. Older gentleman, guy definitely looked like ex-military or an ex-cop. Okay. But this guy was probably 75 years old, Joe. He was an older guy. Okay. But when we were walking into the store behind him, you could clearly see the printing on the back of his jacket. He was wearing a inside the belt Kydex type holster, and he was carrying, no doubt about it, right here in Erie, Pennsylvania. He was concealed carrying.
A lot of people carry here.
Yeah, and that guy had the capability at 70 plus years of age to stop an incident had one occurred in the store that Doug and I were in. And I believe from the man's demeanor, that's probably why he was carrying it. So behavioral modification, if you don't want to get shot in a nightclub, don't be in a nightclub at 2 a.m.
Oh, you're absolutely right, John. I mean, but when we're talking about this situation, obviously that doesn't apply. These people were at school, and that's what makes these types of events so difficult, especially the school shootings, because, you know, a lot can be said, and not that you're blaming the victims, but yeah, if you find yourself in a gay nightclub at 2-3 in the morning and that gets shot up, it's not your fault that it happened, but you could have maybe made better decisions to prevent it from happening.
No, of course not. And let me modify what I just said, because I was really trying to make a sincere point. I am in no way suggesting that because you may want to go out and party, that you're in any way guilty if something like that happens to you. I'm just saying that bad things happen late at night in bars, nightclubs, urban environments. You're a lot more likely to get shot if you're trying to buy drugs in a city at 2:00 in the morning than you are if you're sitting in the park at 2:00 in the afternoon reading a book.
Absolutely. And Bob Griswold talks about this, and many others do as well, the situational awareness. And that is, no matter where you are or what you're doing, always being aware of your surroundings and what's going on with people and their actions around you. And that might sound very tedious and a hard thing to do, but it really isn't. It becomes, once you start doing it, it becomes very, it's almost like a second nature thing.
I have an idea. You want to bring Bob on for a couple minutes tomorrow to talk about situational awareness? Give our listeners a little free training. I know he'd probably be willing to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
You want to reach out to Bob today?
Yeah, it's a good. We'll bring him on for 10-15 minutes. It's a good talk to have and to hear. I guess for people who aren't used to looking at things like this, looking at life, through a more focused lens and paying attention to. A lot of people don't pay attention to what's going on around them, and I see that all the time. But John, switching gears here, I want to point this out. I don't know how we missed this last week. Crazy Eyes Adam Schiff. I put this link in your Skype, John. Crazy Eyes Adam Schiff, and Mark Dice did a video on this morning. That's the only reason that I even found this clip from over a week ago. In this clip, Adam Schiff is saying Russian bots are promoting the Second Amendment and Russia wants the Second Amendment. You have to listen to this. This guy is bat bleep crazy. Okay? I know, John, you're going to have to play it separately.
Yeah, let's
here we go.
But even the bigger quantity of content that was being pushed through social media was just content designed to pit us against each other, to exploit our divisions. So, of course, they, as you have seen, they parroted Black Lives Matter to try to broaden the racial divide in this country. Fascinatingly, they also trumpeted the Second Amendment. Apparently, the Russians are very big fans of our Second Amendment. They don't particularly want a Second Amendment of their own, but they're really glad that we have one. The Russians would be thrilled if we were doing nothing but killing each other every day, and sadly, we are.
So there's Adam Crazy Eyes Schiff saying the Russians and Russian bots want us to have a Second Amendment for the sole purpose that we can kill each other, like we're all going to wipe each other out. That makes no sense. You would think, obviously, Adam Schiff has went into, the Russian Twilight Zone. He's lost forever. I don't think we're ever. He needs to be voted out of office. He needs to be drug tested. Somebody should call the FBI on him to see something, say something, because there is something wrong with this guy.
He might need to be exorcised.
Something, man. I've never seen a person go so far off the deep end in the political spectrum. The Russia investigation in itself is and what the media pushes is a conspiracy theory, and it's been for the last year and a half. And Adam Schiff is furthering this narrative of Russian bots. Like any bots or real fake news had any impact on anybody ever, and they're trying to equate the Second Amendment to Russian bots. I mean, it's amazing to watch this happen.
Adam, just stop. Take a breath. Take a vacation.
I don't know what to say about him. It's a level of insanity that we have not seen to this point. As far as does anybody even believe a word he says? Does anybody believe in these Russian bots having such an influence. They control world events and powerful elections and all this other stuff. I mean, geez, it's crazy. But anyway, back to the networks and the media coverage of this. There was one article on Hagmann Report that deals with the stats networks are pushing school shooting stats from an anti-gun lobbyist group. And this is the liberal media is rushing to use the deaths for more gun control, according to this Newsbusters article, citing a statistic from an anti-gun lobbying group, Every Town for Gun Safety, which claimed there have been 18 school shootings since the start of 2018. But that is actually not true, because they don't take into account the number of, if somebody misfired a gun or shot themselves, like a suicide, or anytime a firearm discharges, either if it was, at the purpose of shooting someone else, the self, or an accident, and it is, they exaggerate these numbers. And this is what the media is going to do. Don Lemon, fear-mongering Lemon. We're all playing the odds before we're shot. And MSNBC and Chris Matthews spent 39 minutes on gun control while minimizing
Wait, hold on. We're all playing the odds before we get shot.
Yeah, that's what he says.
Okay. I'm going to continue to give Don Lemon a break because of his family loss. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, that only goes so far. But, this is going to be a conversation in the mainstream media, obviously, until next week. I hope to learn more about I hope the interrogation and the information of what is learned in those interrogations comes out, and it'll be interesting to see what further red flags were there per this shooter. But it's a sad situation. You have 17 people who are, went to school, never to come home again. You have 17 family members who are never going to see their loved ones again. It's a real situation, and I know a lot of times when we look at it on the TV screen and on the computer, there's sort of a detachment there because we're so desensitized to this violence, and we see these events, and we examine and look into these events so often that there is a impersonal type sediment that we have. It's almost normal until you sit down and actually think about that. What if it happened in your community? What if it happened in your kid's school? And then what
if it happened to you?
Right, right. And then it becomes real. So we always have to keep that in mind when we're dealing with these issues, because a lot of times people will just fly off at the handles without actually thinking about what you're saying and how it can affect the people who actually were affected by this.
And that goes for both sides of the political aisle, by the way. Okay, it's always the lefty gun grabbers that are the first at the party, but let's not forget the point that you made yesterday, Joe. Granted, it was a completely different topic, but let's not forget the Westboro Baptist Church types. Okay, this is not a time, at least in my opinion, it's in very poor taste to get your favorite Molam Abe gif and tweet it out 7,000 times all over Twitter. As Joe just reminded us, there's a lot more than 17 people who are having the worst day of their life today. There's probably more like 500 or 600 when you include parents, step-parents, grandparents, godparents, siblings, uncles, aunts, etc. There's a lot of people whose hearts are absolutely devastated today, and we need to be mindful Christians about this. We need to, regardless of where somebody stands on gun control, we need to remember. And Joe, it drives me nuts. It's so saccharine when I hear people that I know good and darn well never pray a prayer in their lives, and they say, our thoughts and prayers go out to the people of Broward County. And it's like, no, they don't. As soon as the little red light goes off the camera, you're going to go to cocktail hour, and you don't pray ever. So are your thoughts and prayers really going to Broward County? Yeah, go ahead.
Just real quick, there's a lot of information spreading around about the shooter and his possible political affiliations. I have seen pictures of him with a communist T-shirt on, holding up the communist fist. People are saying he is part of Antifa. He's also apparently liked some Syrian extremist resistance groups on Facebook. I'm hearing rumors that the guy was a DACA dreamer. I don't know any of this to be true because I have not seen it myself, but there are a lot, except the picture of him with the Chinese communism T-shirt on and holding up the fist. I haven't seen any of the other information, so I don't know but I'm sure we will learn about all that. It sounds like he says he was adopted. I don't know. He was adopted age 6 apparently and had no legal status in the U.S. prior to that, according to some reports. Now, I have not verified that. That is, I will say right now, a rumor that I read on the internet. But do we have to take that into account if that is true?
Oh, absolutely. If he's a native of another country who imagine this, Joe, if he doesn't know who his parents are, his biological parents, and he knows nothing of the culture of the land that he comes from, when you get into that those teenage identity crisis years, you remember those years, right, where you change your style like 4 times in 1 year. You know, like I know I did it. Like I'm a rocker dude. I drive a Camaro. Then 6 months later, it's like, no, I got the big speakers in my car. I'm into rap music. And 6 months after that, it's like, no, dude, I'm into like the peace love thing, man. I mean, teenagers go through identity crises. When that phase hits, particularly if you've already got a violent streak in you, and you don't know who you are, that you may have just really landed at a baseline of this individual's problems. Real quick, Infowars.com. Reported Florida shooter discussed Alalu Akbar on Instagram profile.
Yeah, I don't know if that's in the context, though, John. Did you see?
Well, no. That's what the point I was about to make. Gunman described as a nihilist loser. Now, nihilist means you don't believe in anything. And Kit Daniels wrote this. It's real short. And the point that he makes in the article, Joe, is simply that this kid seemed to adopt multiple identities. As you just described, it doesn't. I think that to suggest that he was part of any one group right now would just basically be conjecture.
Yeah, and hopefully we learn about, as I said, we learn more information. If there were, one of the 4 or 8 chans put out an article or a thing yesterday saying his voter information, saying he was a registered Democrat. But when I was that age, I was a registered Democrat as well for the first 2 years I was after I was 18. So I don't know that I put much stock into that.
I think everybody's a registered Democrat when you're 18, aren't they? I mean, that's almost automatic. Like you just go down and you punch the D and you get on with your day.
No, you're absolutely right. But either way, if there was some extremist angle on his social media, we will hopefully find out about that, as so much has come out already. But I don't know, John. It is it's unfortunate to see these events continue to unfold in our society, and it seems like it's getting worse and worse, and there's no real remedy that people are ready to implement. But we can move on to a few other things, because
let's
I know
talk about this.
There's a piece on Hagmann Report that you want to talk about. One thing we forgot to talk about yesterday is The View and what Joy Behar said about Mike Pence and his Christian faith that Pastor Langford reminded me of last night. That article's up on Hagmann. There's a few articles on Hagmann Report, and you might have to scroll down for the original one on that. But she called Mike Pence dangerous because he believes that he talks to Jesus. And we also have information on Fusion GPS and Bruce Orr. And if you want to take that one, John, I know you have an article, as well as there's one on Hagmann Report.
Thank you, Joe. I will. And I just got a message back from Bob Griswold. It looks like he is willing to come in and do a quick training on situational awareness, but more on that later. That would be for tomorrow's show. This is curated by the Daily Sheeple, but it was written by Daily Caller, who, in my opinion, is doing some of the finest work out there. Daily Caller and Gateway Pundit are absolutely on the front line of this investigation as it's unpacked and extrapolated. Headline: exclusive, DOJ official Bruce Orr hid wife's Fusion GPS payments from ethics officials. Okay, now in my opinion, Joe, this clearly indicates that Bruce and Nellie Orr, if this pans out the way it looks like it's going to, they're going to go to jail. It says here, Justice Department official Bruce Orr did not disclose Fusion GPS was paying his wife. Orr was demoted from his post after the information emerged. Willfully falsifying government ethics documents can result in jail time. I'll just give people a quick piece of this. Bruce Orr, the Department of Justice official who brought opposition research on President Donald Trump to the FBI, he was almost like the information bagman, Joe, did not disclose that Fusion GPS, which performed that research at the Democratic National Committee's behest, was paying his wife and did not obtain a conflict of interest waiver from his superiors at the Justice Department. Documents obtained by the Daily Caller News Foundation show, and that is linked to the documents. The omission may explain why Orr was demoted from his post as Associate Deputy Attorney General after the relationship between Fusion GPS and his wife emerged, and Fusion founder Glenn Simpson acknowledged meeting with Orr. Willfully falsifying government ethics forms can carry a penalty of jail time if convicted. The Democratic, this is the last piece I'll read. The Democratic National Committee hired Fusion GPS to gather and disseminate damning info about Trump, and they in turn paid Nellie Orr, a former CIA employee with expertise in Russia, for an unknown role related to the, quote, dossier, end quote. Bruce Orr then brought the information to the FBI, kicking off a probe and a media firestorm. And Joe, as the previous paragraph indicates, conveniently forgetting to obtain a conflict of interest waiver. And my question to you, Joe, is, so Bruce Orr was demoted? Why was Bruce Orr not fired immediately? He was demoted. Oh, gee, poor guy.
You know, this is a familiar conversation we seem to be having, whether it is about members of the FBI or the Department of Justice. We continue to see no action taken. The only person that's been fired so far is Jim Comey, the FBI director. And you have the swamp-infested DOJ and FBI who actively worked
had to be fired by the president, Joe.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's crazy because, as you said, the Bruce Orr, the Department of Justice official who brought opposition research on President Trump to the FBI, did not disclose the Fusion GPS, which performed that research at the Democratic National Committee's behest, were paying his wife and did not obtain a conflict of interest waiver. How many times have we seen this? Everybody, it seems in the FBI and DOJ at the top levels, has a conflict of interest in this Trump investigation, in the 2016 election. And Jeff Sessions is the only one that recused himself. But all these people, Peter Strzok and his political leanings and his text messages that show that with Lisa Page, show the extent to the
Andrew
anti-Trump
McCabe.
bias. Yeah,
What
Andy
about
McCabe.
Good Lord.
Exactly. And, you know, it is unbelievable to see these people still have jobs. So when I get on Jeff Sessions, and we got an email from a listener who said, you know, you need to be patient. Stop hammering Jeff Sessions.
I will not stop hammering Jeff Sessions at this point, with all due respect. I've been patient long enough, but go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, and as I said in that broadcast before, I mean, we have the midterm elections coming up. If the foot is not put down by Jeff Sessions on these people and the DNC for the corruption and the subversion of a presidential election and the president of the United States, then there is a big problem in the Justice Department. And Jeff Sessions did have a press conference today and made a statement on the shooting, said that he would, 23% increase in charging gun crimes or gun prosecution since he's taken office. And that's all well and good. But the little things, which I would say aren't that in the political and media world, what he trotted out there is kind of a little thing.
He's sweeping the floor. He's sweeping the floor while the house is on fire, Joe.
Right, especially compared to, we have corruption that has been exposed at the highest levels of government, including the former President Obama, the Justice Department, the FBI, and a few others out there, and nothing is being done about it. I know it takes time to build cases. I know it takes time. You can at least relieve these people from their jobs at the very least. But no, they're collecting pensions. They're collecting all these other things at the taxpayers' expense, still enjoying gainful employment with pensions. And, it just baffles the mind at what these people are able to get away with. Now, when this is all said and done, will we have a different view of Jeff Sessions? Well, it depends on what he does with the information that we have. What do we need? Do we have a smoking gun? I would say with the misrepresenting of the dossier to obtain FISA surveillance warrants on the Trump campaign, yes, we do have a smoking gun, especially if these people knew the information that they were using was only opposition research and it was false and that was all that was used. Then they already have a smoking gun and they can bring the hammer down on a number of people right now. But the fact that these people still have jobs and are still working is beyond my comprehension, and I don't think it's a strategic game of chess being played. I don't know what's going on, but we're going to continue to follow it. We're going to continue to push for justice and the truth. I want to cover something back to the shooting, John, because this has popped up a few times now that I've seen. There's a YouTube video of a witness who is claiming that the suspected shooter, was next to her while shots were fired on the other side of the building. I don't know if you want to play this video, John.
Yeah, if we have time, we've got about 6.5 minutes. Absolutely,
no, we got about 10 minutes.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, okay, very good. Yeah, let's go ahead and drop it in my box, and let's go ahead and play that.
All right, this is I don't know how this is going to sound because this is not a YouTube video. This is a video from Twitter. But let's turn the volume all the way up. All right. Let's see what this quote-unquote witness has to say.
The moment, and I came back to my classroom and I knocked on the door and the fire alarm went off, and principal came on the speaker and just said, everyone needs to evacuate right now. So that's what we did. As I was going down the stairs, I heard a couple shots fired. Everyone was freaking out, saying that it was a gun.
And the fire alarm went.
As we were walking,
I actually was in the bathroom at the moment, and I came back to my classroom.
Go ahead, play yours. Yeah.
Fire alarm went off.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
I actually was in the bathroom at the moment, and I came back to my classroom and I knocked on the door. And the fire alarm went off, and principal came on the speaker and just said, everyone needs to evacuate right now. So that's what we did. As I was going down the stairs, I heard a couple shots fired. Everyone was freaking out, saying that it was a gun. And as we were walking, the whole class together, I actually was speaking to the suspect, Nicholas Cruz. And as I was speaking to him, he seemed very, I don't know what the word I want to say is, but he was trouble in middle school. So I kind of joked to him about it and said, I'm surprised you weren't the one who did it. And he just gave me a huh. So that's really what happened.
You were walking down the hall. He had already fired at that time.
Yes, sir, with him.
Weren't you scared?
In the moment I wasn't, because there was obviously definitely another
John.
shooter involved.
You can stop that. I understand what she's saying, and so this makes sense. What I read reports that the how the shooter escaped was by hiding in with other students. So it was misrepresented on a title here where it said that there was possibly a second shooter, but that makes sense that if this kid fired the shots, left or dropped the gun, and then hid with other students who were evacuating, that makes sense. But it is kind of a strange story, and I don't know that I've seen that on any other network.
She actually sounds credible too. Now this came off Laura Loomer's Twitter feed, Joe, and I think that Laura may have disseminated this differently than you and I. What I'm inferring from what the young lady's describing, and again, if you look at her in the video, her demeanor is very calm. She's credible in my opinion, just based on her demeanor. I think what we're hearing is this is ex post facto. This is after he did the shooting. He blended in next to this girl, and he managed to maintain his composure. Whereas I think Laura Loomer may have read it that there was still shooting going on. Which is understandable because the young lady starts off by saying that she heard a couple of shots and she was walking down the stairs. So this could be a linchpin of this story, Joe.
Well, we'll see. I mean, further details are going to come out. There's even a video, very short video, inside the classroom of students crouching in the classroom, and it sounds like gunfire very close by. It's maybe a 7 or 13 second video, but it doesn't show any shooting. It doesn't show the shooter, and I don't know. I don't know that taking video during those situations, especially if your life's in danger, John. I don't know what what people are thinking when they pull their phones out and start filming when they're in a life-threatening scenario. To me, that's kind of dangerous
because
behavior.
You and I did. It is dangerous behavior. It is antithetical to situational awareness. But remember, you and I did not grow up with iPhones in our back pockets. This is a generation who was born really roughly right around the time that BlackBerries were the big thing, and by the time they were old enough to comprehend what's going on, the first iPhones were out. Can you believe that?
Yeah, it's when I was in the only thing I had when I was in high school was a beeper. I had a beeper for the last 2 years of my high school, and then cell phones really started coming out after that. But yeah, we never had phones in school. That was not something that was when I was in elementary school. That's when computers first started to be coming into school, and you had a computer room with maybe 10 of the old green, small box computers with those green screens.
Boxes.
Yeah. And then by the time I was a senior in high school, you still had computer labs where you didn't have computers in school, but you had a lab with computers that you went to or whatever. So it still wasn't like technology's changed and increased so much over the last 20 years. It's unbelievable. And is it any correlation to the behavior that we see in our society with the craziness and chaos?
There's one more thing I want to say, and I'll make this my final comment for today's Hagmann Daily Show, except to reiterate that Robert Griswold, the founder and proprietor of Ready Made Resources, has agreed to join us for 20 minutes tomorrow, Friday the 16th, for a brief tutorial on situational awareness. But aside from that, Joe, I would be very interested. I'm going to try to find an expert gamer that I can interview and maybe get to the bottom of this. Remember in the 1940s and 50s, they used to insert quick little pieces of celluloid with Coca-Cola or popcorn or whatever into actual feature films, and it would drive people back up the aisle to the snack bar to purchase more Coca-Cola, popcorn, etc. And that was subliminal advertising. And then Congress in the 60s and early 70s signed a host of laws against subliminal manipulation through film and television. They made it ostensibly illegal. But I don't know if video games have that stuff implanted in them. We know that some of the early video games were designed to create chemical reactions in the brain. There was one game where you grew strawberries. I can't think of what it was called, Farmville maybe? And everybody was addicted to playing this stupid, boring game where you sat there and you literally watched crops grow. But they were able to prove that it created a dopamine wash on one's mind. I'm wondering if there's subliminal stuff in these incredibly violent games that create the Adam Lanzas, if in fact he ever existed, or that create this Nicholas guy from yesterday, Virginia Tech shooter, etc.
Well, I don't know, John, because when we were growing up, we had Nintendos and Segas and all that stuff, but we played outside most of the time. And when we did play video games, we always played the fighting games or the sports games. But even after that, when you play by yourself and you're playing games like Call of Duty and these other shooter games that people have issues with, I mean, I played those all the time, or not all the time, but I played them enough. And I don't want to. I think if anything, it adds. It might add something to the mentality of a shooter. I don't think it will these people still be killers if they didn't ever interact with games like that. I believe that to be true. I don't think the game creates a killer. I think maybe it might desensitize them. It might give them ideas. We don't know the extent that these movies and games, violent games, have on children or children's minds. John, we're out of time. It's unfortunate we have to spend the whole time talking about this, but it is what is front and center right now today, and will be throughout the rest of this week. Don't forget our sponsor, simplycleanfoods.net. You can get a year's worth of food on a payment plan, or even without paying for 6 months. What you want to do is go to simplycleanfoods.net, and the phone number's there, and I'll give it to you here. It is 737-400-2066. GMO-free food, made in the USA, Christian and veteran-owned, and one ingredient in the food, and that is the food you're buying. SimplyCleanFoods.net. Great show, John.
The Hagmann Daily Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.